If you were the Fed, what do you do?
If I'm the Fed, I send the economy into recession, gain some credibility, and set us up for a good 2023.
You just
This year's a wash.
You just throw in the flag.
Well, it's not even throwing in the flag; it's punting. I mean, you're football. You're all football guys. Like it's you're punting. The Fed is if they don't like. There's two choices. You can be what's my man in San Diego who always goes up forward and fourth down. You can be that guy and out of the playoffs, or you can punt the ball and live to fight another day. And I think punting the ball equates to engineering a slowdown in the economy, and it's not just our economy. The Fed can take crude oil from $130 a barrel to $65 a barrel overnight if it wanted to. Take the policy rate up 500 basis points and see what happens. They don't want to do that, obviously. They don't want big changes because big changes tend to scare people and you get all these side effects as it relates to credit intermediation, all this, there's a lot of side effects in the financial plumbing of it all.
So what do they end up doing? Do they just raise interest rates to like
they're going to try to
300 basis points?
I think
3%?
Yeah, no, I don't think they're going to get that far. The problem is, again, the Fed is starting this tightening process too late in the business cycle.
And well, to be clear, we're at 8% CPI. They haven't raised rates at all, and they were literally buying assets like 2 weeks ago.
Like 2 weeks ago, yeah. I know. These guys are doing QE like 2 weeks ago, dude. Yeah, it's fun.
The Fed did QE for 9 months while inflation was above 5%.
I know. I'm sure I'll write a book at some point.
That's a great tweet.
Career.
Somebody should fire that one off. That's a freebie for somebody out there.
Totally. The start of my book will be, and the Fed was buying bonds like 2 weeks into this, like 2 weeks ahead of this. So yeah, no, my point is, so they're going to try to walk a fine line, right? The Fed doesn't want to spook anybody. They certainly don't want to upset what's priced in the markets from a policy tightening standpoint. So they're going to do the 25 basis points. Maybe they'll talk up if Russia-Ukraine goes well, we'll do 50 basis points in May or we'll do 50 basis points in June. But the reality is, as long as inflation momentum stays elevated, the probability that 50 basis points in May gets solidified and then 50 basis points in June, that gets solidified, those probabilities start to go up. And so it's increasingly looking like the Fed might have to front load a lot of tightening as a function of being so behind the curve on inflation, so behind the curve as it relates to the economy. This is the lowest the unemployment rate's ever been prior to the Fed lifting interest rates ever in the history of the Fed funds rate. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a saying on Wall Street that the Fed, tends to cause an accident when it tightens policy. It usually tightens until it breaks something. It breaks something in financial markets or it breaks something in the real economy. The Fed is definitely going to break something because the probability of them breaking something is as high as it's ever been because they're so late in this process. Imagine like
why did we get here? Like why didn't they do something earlier?
Because
was it arrogance, ignorance?
No, well, there's a couple reasons. I think I'm so glad you said arrogance, and myself as a professional forecaster, I think I would consider myself and everybody who does this for a living. We all need to eat a little bit of humble pie. Nobody got this inflation call right. I mean, with the exception, I think Jim Bianco. I don't think he had forecast, but he certainly. He had a view that inflation would be stickier and persistent. I remember that back in the summer where a lot of folks didn't. But generally speaking, nobody saw 7.9% inflation 9 months ago. Mm-hmm. Nobody saw 5% inflation 12 months ago. So the reality is we all got this wrong. But the problem is we're not setting policy. The Fed is setting policy on its forecasts, which are obviously wrong by a double. And so that's a problem. So arrogance is a factor in terms of transitory. But the real factor of why they're so late is because they made themselves that they chose to be late. Go back to the fall of 2020 when they changed their inflation target, their inflation mandate, basically to an average inflation targeting scheme, which means instead of saying 2% is the ceiling on inflation, we're comfortable having inflation average 2%, the core PCE specifically. So they changed that, and the reason they changed that was the real change that matters. They kind of adopted a woke framework, to be quite frank. This concept of maximum and inclusive employment really stemmed from, kind of the wake of the George Floyd protests, all this stuff. And the Fed realized after having done a lot of research, and this is something I've been talking about my whole career, which is the Fed always takes the punch bowl away when, the economy starts getting good for disaffected groups, African Americans to Hispanics. Those are typically, those people typically have higher unemployment rates. Their unemployment rates go down usually after, whites and Asians and stuff like that. So I think the Fed wanted to do something to address the kind of zeitgeist of America back in that particular time frame. And what they said was, hey, look, we're going to ease policy until we see the whites of the eyes of the lowest unemployment rate ever for these particular groups. And they actually did that. And they did that. And they made a lot of real substantial progress in Q4. in particular for females, for the, for folks without high school diplomas, all this stuff. And so they got what they wanted. But the problem is they had to keep easing and go crazy and go ham with balance sheet and 0% interest rates to get that done. And now we're dealing with the consequences.
Hey you, did you like this video? Great, we make 5 of them a day and post them here on this channel. Make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and see you next time.